All right, so we're back better than ever after a little, we'll call it a holiday break.
Holiday break.
Yeah, versus the Mandy dying break. Mm-hmm. By her dying, I mean, she just didn't want to get out of bed for 3 weeks. So.
Just had a quick emergency surgery, no big deal.
Nah, just being lazy, didn't want to get out of bed.
Mm.
Yeah, she's been using the same excuse for 3 weeks.
I have, and yet here I am.
Yeah. So this is going to be the first episode release in 2025. I keep wanting to say 2026. I want to skip a whole year already.
We probably should.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about. We're going to get out the old broken crystal ball. And make our predictions.
Okay.
For what we think the market is going to be like. Yeah.
I always love these questions because people are like, "What do you think?"
I know. What do you think?
I guess
that's why I call it the broken crystal ball. Right?
Yeah, that's 100% what it is.
Yeah, if
but
it worked, I wouldn't be
want
here.
A real answer.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Like, I don't
and
know.
It's funny because, everybody talked about the Fed rate cuts for the year, right? For this year. And they're like, yeah, interest rates will go down. And
They
then
said that all year.
And then as soon as the Fed cuts the rates, I saw all the posts by all the realtors talking about now's the time, they're cutting rates, now's the time, and then rates went up.
Significantly,
so,
not even just a little bit.
Yeah, so it just goes to show you that nobody can truly predict what's going to happen because even with 2 cuts with the Fed, the interest rates for mortgages went up both times.
And they're up
and
right
they've
now,
stayed steady since then. And then they turned around and announced only 2 cuts, but see how that goes.
I feel they can say that they can say whatever they want. It
they
doesn't
can.
matter.
I mean, they've said everything they've said they've reversed on at some point. Whether they're holding fast, not doing this increase or doing, this many cuts or whatever, they've changed their mind by the next month on what they're going to happen or what's going to happen. But when they did say that, though, the market kind of tanked a little bit for that. So with that being said, and you may know the numbers better than me because I really didn't look at it. But nationwide for 2024, the real estate market was down 2%, at least from where I read. I'm sure depending on what you read and where you go, you can get different numbers, and that was year over year, right? So if we're talking about some of the hardest quote unquote years, the fact that it was down even more than the previous year, and hearing a lot of agents talk about how hard the year was, Virginia was kind of flat, plus or minus a percentage. I don't really know what Richmond did, where Richmond was year over year. Again, depending on who you talk to, I've seen agents post that it's up. I've seen agents post that it was down, but it's also the same agents that said that the rates were going to go down when the Fed cuts happen. So it's one of those things. You get the numbers, you find the right numbers, you can get them to say whatever you want, right?
100%.
Because 100%. You also Google mortgage rates, and you'll see 10 articles, and 5 of them talk about the rates going down. The same ones from the same day. 5 other ones will be like, "Oh yeah, rates are up." So like, where are we at?
Yeah.
For us personally, or as a business, we still have. I'll probably look tomorrow, but last time I looked, we were up 20% year over year for inspections, and we're going to finish the year probably around 24% up year over year.
Good.
For inspections. So, if this was like the low point for the last few years, minus when the rates tripled overnight. For the last 6 months of whatever year that was, 2021. This was the hardest year, then 2025 should be pretty good for us, considering how many we did. So with that, what do you think?
So I have a few opinions about this. So I'm only going to talk about our market here locally because that's the only thing that I feel qualified to speak on.
Right.
But so year over year, we did see less sales this year than previous years. But what I think is, the equity, you're still gaining equity at a good rate. So homeownership is still a smart thing as long as, and this will always be true, as long as you're purchasing smart. And that's what I feel like the difference was this year, is that the people who are purchasing homes this year are very intentional about purchasing those homes and are much more kind of aware of doing that the right way than they have been previously. I feel like during the height of the market, people were just so rushed and they were being a little bit impulsive with their decisions to purchase a home because they wanted those low interest rates and because the market was a feeding frenzy. But the buyers that I've had now and worked with, and even the sellers, like I feel like people are being very, very conscious and aware and careful with what they're doing right now, which I think is great. My perspective is, and always will be, this is the thing that I have said forever, and it's always true. When somebody asks me, when's the right time to buy? When do you think it's the right time to buy? When's the right time to sell? The only thing that matters, the only two things you need to pay attention to when whether or not it's the right time to buy is you find the house that you love and you can afford it. Yeah. That's it. Stop worrying about the rates. Stop worrying about if a crash is coming. Like, all of these things are factors completely outside of your control. Like, there's no way for us to predict that. Absolutely no way. But if you can comfortably afford the home that you love right now, with where the rates are right now, with a plan of action for the future, for perhaps a refinance down the line, and you still can have a little nest egg for anything that goes wrong, like, that is the time. That is the perfect time to buy your house. Anything else, irrelevant.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing with the rates, and I had this conversation probably last week, week before last, before Christmas, and because we're recording this the day before New Year's, is talking to a lender. I said, everybody's whole marketing campaign when it comes to the rates is again, we're talking about the rate cuts and the rate drops and all that stuff, but really, if the rates stay steady, I think that's better for the market. Like, even if they're pushing 7%, if they stay steady versus the volatility and the swings, it's going to be better overall, because you're going to have less people waiting for that. At some point, people are like, you know what, the rates have been plus or minus a few points for the last 6 months, 8 months, a year. It's just not going to happen anymore. Like, the swings are over for now. And it just becomes the normal versus waiting for like a stock market when you're trying to get into the market. Oh, we got to get when it dips, right? And then we sell when it's high and all that stuff. So you're not waiting for that anymore.
No.
So like at some point it's just, okay, we've stabilized for now. And yeah, it's high, but it's been like this for a while, and it's just kind of what it is. If we want to move, we have to move. We just got to do it. And you're right. You gotta, COVID, when the rates were low, it was a lot of emotion buying. Some of it was just because the rates were low. Some of it was because this is, the frenzy that was, and people bought a lot of houses based on emotion and not practicality.
No.
And those people are the ones that at some point when because they have that low interest rate, but they're not happy. So at some point they're going to realize, like, either rates do get down in that 5.5%, 6% where they're okay giving up that mortgage and buying the house that they actually want, or at some point they're just going to be like, you know what, it is what it is. If we can refinance later, we'll refinance later. Yep. But with that being said, a lot of those people that's setting on those interest rates, they're still not going to sell. If they can afford it, because they're going to take that 2.5%, 3%, and that's going to be an investment property. So, and that just lends to, it's not going to fix. Even when we're waiting for those people to move off, it may not fix the actual inventory issue, because they're just going to hold it. Because why wouldn't you? Like, if you can afford another house and just rent that house out with 2.5%, 3% interest rate, why would you not? So yeah, I think at the end of the day,
I kind of disagree with you a little.
What?
So I think that absolutely, if you have a 2 or 3% interest rate, it would be smart for you to hold it and to keep it as an investment property. I think, though, the average person is not going to do that, because average person does not want to be a landlord. They do not want to deal with the headache. They don't know what to do. They don't know what steps to take. So I think, and I've already kind of seen it, you're exactly right. I think one of my predictions for 2025 is we're going to start seeing a pretty significant influx of the people who bought those houses at 2 and 3% interest rates and are realizing this doesn't work for my lifestyle anymore, or my family, or whatever. And we're going to see inventory rise more, which is exactly what happened last year too. But I think this year, over the next couple of years, we'll probably see a lot more of that, because people are going to be like, well, I mean, I could rent it out, or I could collect the massive amount of equity that I have in it now and call it a day. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it could be split. I mean, it could go either way.
And I wish people would. I wish that they understood and were educated on the ways that they could hold that property and what the benefit is to doing that, and how there's options to do that.
And I think the ones that'll do it are the ones that have good sounding boards when they start having that discussion, you know, and they're getting that feedback from people who understand, whether it's their parents, whether it's friends, whether it's investors themselves. Like,
well, and it should be your agent too.
Yeah.
You're like, sure. I think of like my clients who have those properties, right? Where I know we close them out at a 2% rate or a 3% rate or even a 4% rate. Like if I'm having those conversations with them and they're telling me like, oh, I just don't want to give up my rate. I'm like, would you like to discuss your options with a lender of like how to keep that property and that rate? Because I mean, essentially when you're looking at a 2% rate on a mortgage, that's pretty much free money on a mortgage. Like it is kind of silly to let go of it, especially when you could take some of that equity out and leverage it into your next property if it makes sense. But again, it's, did you find a house that you love and can you afford it? Can you afford it holding on to this other property? Yeah. If not, cut your losses and move on.
Pretty much. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I also saw an infographic that has been floating around. A couple of people posted it, that the prediction, it was like a nationwide thing, but you know, what markets are going to do the best in 2025, and Richmond's on there at like a 22% increase year over year in sales. So what do you think about that?
I mean, I think, and I've thought this for probably at least the last few years of my career, especially when we saw the height of the market and when the rates were so low and then we saw such competition, and people thought back then, like, I can't tell you how many times people were like, oh, the market's going to crash, because they saw a really high, like, volume market. A lot of people trying to get in, and they were just like, it's not sustainable, it's going to crash out and blah, blah, blah. But I think that Richmond has been significantly underpriced for a pretty small major city for a long time. If you look at other small cities across the country, Richmond is very underpriced, even still.
For sure, because, and not that it's comparable to Nova, you know, Fairfax and DC and whatnot, but that's why everybody during the remote came down here.
And still is.
Yeah. So because of how underpriced, and compared to like Virginia Beach and other places, for sure. Yeah.
And I think it just goes to show too, like, if you really are somebody who wants to get into real estate investing and you're looking at this more of like, how do I gain a lot of equity really quickly, then your best bet probably isn't going to be to go to the major city. You probably need to go outside of that major city just a bit, because that's where the equity is. Like, and that's what investors are doing. They're going to the outskirts now. That's what builders are doing too, because that's where it's still affordable. And where you haven't seen those increases, that's where you make the money, but you have to be willing to do it. That's the risk associated, right? Absolutely.
One of the things that I learned recently, my uncle, great uncle, he works up in DC, and they take that into consideration with your salary, like where you live. So he lives in DC to get DC salary. If he were to live outside of DC, he would get paid less. And that's wild. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than military housing allowance. You know, if you're stationed in,
it's your cost of living.
Virginia Beach, Hampton, Norfolk, Newport News, they all have a different rate for your monthly housing allowance based on which city you're in, for sure.
And I do think, to your point, and there's been a lot of studies on this throughout at least the last year that I've seen, where if rates were just to stabilize and just kind of stay steady, that's actually what we need more than anything. Yeah. Because you're right, it is the volatility of it that's turning people off. And there was one study that I read that they were saying if rates, like, it seemed like from everyone that they did the poll for the survey, most people have completely let go of the idea that we're going to see 4 and 5% interest rates again, or like low fives. Like, people have finally accepted, like, baby, that's not coming back. So what they found is that most people, if they were between a 6 and a 6.5%, would be happy and would be willing to make a move.
Yeah. Absolutely. Which I was like, and that's going to keep moving up as we keep getting further and further away from that. Because before it was like, well, 5.5%. Then it was 5.5%, 6%.
Well, and my question is, so when you bought your first house, do you remember what your interest rate was on your first house?
No, that's a question for the wife.
But literally, I mean, I am the wife, right? But like, I didn't know. And if you ask most people, like, what was your interest rate on your first house? They have no idea.
No. But they were looking at to somebody back in 1962, it was 19%.
Or it was 21%, and they have to tell you. and they're like, it doesn't matter that my house was $12. Right. I had a 21% interest rate.
It cost me $12 and 2 cows.
Yeah, exactly. But I find that funny because this is always my argument is like, okay, again, it goes back to, can you afford the house? Can you afford the payment? Who the hell cares what your interest rate is? Stop fixating on that. Can you afford the house? Knowing what you know, that home values are still rising, and they're rising higher than above average still. The housing market is still outpacing the stock market, and it has for a very long time. So I just like people fixate on the interest rates only because they got so low. I'm like, you did not care about this until they completely plummeted. But let us not forget, that was a global pandemic. Yeah. There is a reason those rates got so low. And I promise you don't want to go back to that.
No, because at the end of the day, everybody's waiting for that, like the offset for the cost of the house for the low rate. You're paying the same or if not more at 100%. That point. Because again, we were going, how many people waived appraisals and over asking and things like that. Mm-hmm. So if we go back
50,
to that,
60, 70,000 above asking.
Because we're still got the inventory problem. So it's not going to be any better. So you may have a 4% interest rate because they drop, but you're paying $200,000 more for that house than what you would have today.
And the problem is, like, I see this so much being behind the scenes. Anytime that those rates drop, we see the floodgates open. Yeah. And then when they start rising, like I always say, so I was raised in Wisconsin, and when my dad taught me how to drive, he would take me out in the blizzards, right? And when you're spinning out of control, you're supposed to pump the brakes. You can't slam on the brakes, right? Because you're going to die if you slam on the brakes. To me, this is what we are calculated behind this. Like, they are trying to increase the rates to slow things down, to help control what happens. But if you don't, then let's say we just go ahead and throw up 5.5% interest rates right now, it's going to be a bloodbath all over again. We can't do that. So I don't think that there's enough education and helping people understand, like, stop fixating on the rate and stop thinking that you want these low interest rates, because I promise you don't. Bad things are happening when they go that low.
Yeah, true. And your best bet is to get what you want now. And then if they do get that low, just refinance. Right. Because you already have what you want. Mm-hmm. And, now you didn't compete for it. You have to go over asking for it. You have to waive everything.
Right.
So now you get to save a couple dollars because you refinance. Mm-hmm. And going back to the original point of, the people predicting, it was like top 10 cities that's going to be the greatest, whatever, unless something unique happens, like a 27% growth year over year in anything is astronomical. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, unless you're brand new in a business, and that second year, third year, fourth year, you see double digit growth, 27% home sales year over year growth with no catalyst for it. Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty high. Yeah. I'm not saying it won't rise. We're coming out of a hard year, right? And that's subjective to who you talk to as well. I think more realistically might be closer to 10.
Yeah.
If not less than that, plus or minus. But again, it just depends on all the different factors. So I wouldn't. Yeah. But a lot of people are waiting, especially agents and lenders and people who've just struggled. They're just waiting for that. Like, 27%. Like, we're back in the game. We're good. Right. When reality is, and maybe it will be that way. But again, that's a high increase year over year without a significant catalyst. Mm-hmm. Like, I can attribute our 20-some% growth year over year to a variety of factors. Mm-hmm. And it's not because the market did well, because again, sales are down, right, year over year for us. So as a region, well, everywhere. But for us, it constitutes not just what we do, our marketing efforts, but also how many people have gone out of business. Yep. So we're absorbing other people's businesses because there's less companies to do so, and newer businesses aren't getting the foothold that they want. Mm-hmm. Versus COVID, there was a callus for the ridiculousness of how many inspections we were doing. So like I said, without anything actually pushing that narrative or that envelope, I just don't see 27%.
No, I don't either. And I do think with kind of that in mind, I think for 2025, we're going to see, at least on my end, I wholeheartedly expect to see a lot of brokerages go out of business, or a lot of brokerages move to a cloud-based brokerage instead of being their own brokerage. So I think you're going to see the EXP and the Compass and the Real increase in their number of agents because brokerages it's their only hope to not close their doors,
Yeah,
is to
'cause it's
stay their
expensive.
brand under a brokerage shelter.
Yeah, I mean, real estate as when you're leasing the real estate for an office, it's expensive.
I mean, a brokerage, like I love to study companies. It's like one of my hobbies. A brokerage those are tight margins to begin with. They don't really make sense. It's not a very brilliant business structure, in my opinion. It's kind of one of the worst ones that I would ever participate in if it was me. But like it's tough, especially because agents expect the moon now.
Yeah.
They want all of this stuff because in their heads, they're like, I'm spending all this money or I'm giving you all this money. I should have all these resources.
All the resources.
That costs a lot of money. That costs a
does.
lot more money than what you're bringing in with your 6 deals a year. Like, what are you talking about?
And then you got caps, right? So at some point, you only
That's
getting
where
so
brokerages
much money.
screwed up, was doing caps.
So you only get so much money from that if they're a top producing agent, right? Because as soon as they cap, that's it.
Well, and that's the other thing that I think people don't realize is you don't actually make your money in a brokerage from your high producing agents. Your high producing agents are usually the ones that are taking up a lot of resources and they're giving you the least amount of money, right? Because the more money you make, typically the higher your cap is. So you get to keep more of your paycheck and you're giving less to the brokerage. Right. Where a brokerage actually makes their money is they need producing rookie agents, and more than anything, they need mid-level agents who are producing.
Right, absolutely.
They need those agents who can stay in that like 10 to 15 deals a year.
Yeah.
That's your money.
Yeah.
Good luck with that though.
And then you factor in the changing landscape for realtors with the lawsuit and how that's still evolving, and no one still knows what that's actually going to look like. I think there's going to be, there's a lot of people wanting to opt out of their NAR membership and all those things. And so I think it's not just the market, but it's also the industry that has some potential changes in 2025.
100%. And one of the things that I fear too is, from what I've seen, right? I'm going on 8 years now, and throughout the height of the market, what I saw a ton of, and now that I teach too, is that agents stopped training. They stopped learning. They stopped getting training. There's so many agents who don't even know what the lawsuit was, why it's happening, what the ins and outs are, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. I mean, it's insane. I sat in on that. I had a 3-hour NAR, it's your triennial ethics, right? So it's this 3-hour Zoom, and there was over 140 agents on that thing. And the amount of questions that got asked that these agents should have known. They should have known the difference. They should have known what they were asking. They should have already known the answer. It is concerning. And I think when you're seeing brokerages move to cloud-based structures too, one of the biggest knocks or digs for those cloud-based structures is that there's a lack of training.
Sure.
They're too big. They have way too many agents, and there's not somebody really overseeing and making sure that their agents are trained and good at what they do and careful and know what to actually do to do this job.
Yeah, because a lot of it, and I've heard it from both, when local associations try to do town halls and with the cloud base, is that you only have so many slots to fill virtually. Mm-hmm. And when you have thousands and thousands of agents and your Zoom capacity, whatever is 100, 200, 500, whatever it is at pop.
There's over 8,000 agents here locally.
Yeah.
8,000.
Yeah.
And every time those town halls have maybe 400 agents in them.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
It is. It is. Because I saw several agents with a cloud brokerage talk about how they couldn't get in any of their brokers' training classes for the settlement because they were always constantly full. And they're like, how am I supposed to get the information?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or a lot of them just won't. They just won't.
Yeah.
And that's true across all brokerages, right? I can't tell you how many. I usually open up my class to all RVA agents, right? And even, granted, I don't put out a blast to every single agent, but the ones that I know, they all know you're welcome at any point or whatever. But most people just don't show up. They just don't care, or they're too busy. And it's okay, that's great that you're so busy until you're in court or arbitration. Yeah. And then what? I bet you wish you would have spent an hour a week learning what the heck to do. Yeah,
for sure. And it's funny because real estate, it's a lot of free training, right? I mean, between the associations, between the brokerages, a lot of times it's a lot of free training. But when the market does go down, and this is true for just about every industry, the two things that get cut is training and marketing, right? In the fire department, when the down years happen, especially like the '08 collapse and all that stuff, because that affected everybody, not just the real estate market. Our training budgets got cut. That was one of the first things that got cut. But because we had to pay for it at all costs. You can't go to the burn building and do some burn days and get sharper in skills because it costs a lot of money to do that. Yeah. Versus in real estate, how many brokerages offer just in-house training that's just show up, but even then they still don't, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And the thing that is really disappointing to me is how many of the agents, like our industry, especially in the last 12 to 18 months, has changed so many times. I mean, I can pinpoint at least 6 times over the last 12 months that our forms have completely changed. And so I see a ton of like even high producing agents. Sometimes I think that this is even a bigger issue. Usually the rookies or the mid-level agents are the ones who are like, okay, I have the time or I'm going to prioritize this. But a lot of times it's actually your high producing agents who get a little too, I think you're a little high on your horse. And it's like, wait a second, like it's great that you do a bunch of sales volume, but when you're recklessly running all over town and every single one of your deals, or at least a vast majority of them, is on fire because of your lack of training, that's a problem. Yeah. That's a huge problem, especially because like you've worked so hard to build up this reputation. But honey, like it takes a minute to burn that all to the ground.
Yes, it does.
The more and more you keep making mistakes that are simple, that you shouldn't have made, that you didn't need to make if you would have just spent an hour or two a week prioritizing this.
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time talking to Jeff with the WDI stuff because he talks about the forms. The forms were changed in 2019. Yep. And there's still a lot of misunderstanding and agents not realizing that the forms actually changed or they're still using old forms. And the whole understanding of what a termite inspection is and how do you recommend treatment versus not changed with that one form.
Well, my favorite too is how many agents think that it's a termite inspection. It's a wood destroying insect report.
Also
so that's
to
all
the next
insects.
Point. Yeah. And then the important thing is wood destroying. That's not mice. That's not raccoons. That's not bats.
Yes, wood destroying insects.
Just had that conversation because he has a client calling about, well, I don't think I should pay for, because there's mice in his house. I should have to pay for treatment. And the response was, well, I'm sorry, but it's wood destroying insects. He's like, and the response from the client was, well, my agent didn't tell me that.
Because most agents don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So now he's like, well, I mean, do you think I should do it for free?
Well,
like
we have a huge carpenter bee.
Contract.
Yes. Like I think of all of these different, like we have multiple, I mean, we're in the South, right? Like there's a whole lot of bugs and humidity and all sorts of critters
you got
here.
powderfish beetles, carpenter bees, woodpeckers, right? I mean, that happens because we have a lot of homes that's got that old wood siding on it. And it's almost guaranteed carpenter bees or something is drilling into the side of them someplace. Along with the termites and carpenter ants and anything that can just eat wood.
Well, and there's so this is one of the classes that I teach too. So there's a limitation paragraph within our purchase agreement where it automatically defaults to $1,000 of repairs is what the seller would be responsible for your termite and also for your well and septic, right?
Okay.
$1,000 is nothing.
Especially for septic.
And there's a blank in there where we can increase that amount. And I do on every single purchase agreement that I write. And nobody ever calls me on it. None of the agents ever know to look for it because it's like in what we call the junk drawer of the purchase agreement, right? Like it's like a bunch of paragraphs of just a bunch of stuff. So it's just kind of hidden in there. But I don't think many agents are actually telling their clients like, hey, you've got a 4,000 square foot house. We need to increase this limitation by quite a bit. Because otherwise, we're going to run into a problem, or the seller can say, I only have to put $1,000 through for that. So that's all I'm going to do. Yeah,
I ran into it the other day. The agent was on site, and I told the client, I don't know what your contract says. I don't. But there's significant termite damage in the crawl space. Like you're talking about, you're going to have to jack the house up, get the seal plate out, do all the things. With what I can just see, I said, you're at minimum $5,000, and that's on a low end contractor.
Right.
Like we can be 10 to 15 just on the termite damage because of what's involved with fixing this. I said, but, and he asked about treatment. I said, treatment's the cheap part. You know, I said the seller's going to get a termite treatment or inspection, depending on what shakes out, whether or not they treat or not. But the treatment's not. That's the cheap part. Even if it's $1,000, that's the cheap part. I said, but there is a provision in there where they are responsible. But unless you've changed it, it's a pretty low number, like 1,000, 1,500, whatever it was. But these are all questions, obviously, for your real estate agent to navigate and negotiate and figure out from there.
Which is unfortunate because by the time you show up, the purchase agreement has already been ratified. So if they didn't make that change and if their agent wasn't educated or trained to do their job properly and to walk them through this, then that's going to be a headache down the road that didn't need to be. That could have already preemptively given them more for what they're probably going to need. Because I'm sorry, but in 2025, almost like $1,000 is doing nothing. Absolutely nothing.
It's not. It's not. That's, you know, that's a joist, 2 joists that you're sistering. That's it.
And I would say too, like I kind of have this feeling of like, from a buyer's perspective, I kind of want my buyers to start paying for termite inspections and just doing a termite inspection on their own when they're doing their home inspection. Because like the seller is responsible, right, for doing one. But to me, I'm like, I would want to know. And as a buyer, I mean, they're anywhere from like $39 to $75 for the inspection. So it's like, it's not a ton of money.
Right.
And at least then you're getting the full report. You get to be there. They're going to show you stuff and photos and everything. Whereas if the seller's doing it, the seller, if everything is fine, they're just going to submit that to the title companies. They don't even tell you anything. Like, so I don't love that from a buyer's perspective.
100%,
like
100%. Yeah. We get a lot of requests. We sub it out. We don't do it ourselves because that's a whole other set of liability I don't want to deal with.
Right.
But we do get a lot of questions where the buyers just want to know for themselves. And then, like I said, there's still not just agents that don't know about the new form. There's still a lot of companies that use the old form on termite companies that use the old form. Yeah. And then we've also seen, and this is, I've always said, you know, we can bang on home inspectors and realtors and every other trade just as much, but there's quite a few, you know, list agents that use their termite company because, right. And then the buyer moves in and like, hey, you know, I see active termites, you know, but I had a clear report, you know, what's the problem? So it's just, and it's no different than if I say you see my name on a pre-listing inspection, still get your own inspection as a buyer, right? Yeah. Because things can change, things can be missed, you know, things can be looked at different angles, whatever, or you just find somebody who just pushed it on through to make everybody happy and not cause any waves, and there's actual problems existing. So always get your own, because like I said, it's, you know, $40 to $75. Yeah, you know,
it's not that big of a deal.
Who you're gonna go with, just to know for yourself. Yeah. And then, you know, because I've seen this happen, which I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but the contract states that if you use a termite company for WDI, they're supposed to provide a warranty, right? There's a lot of times this buyer has moved in and the company says, no, we don't do warranties. Like, sucks to suck, right? We're not treating that.
Which is kind of interesting because technically, which I actually should go back and look at it and see if they adjusted that since with all of, I mean, because our purchase agreement has been adjusted literally so many times this year. But that is one that I'm curious about because technically speaking, once the deal has closed, the purchase agreement, this is another huge misconception that I see with people. Once your purchase agreement has closed, that transaction is done, that purchase agreement and any related addendums no longer qualify. Right. The deal is closed. Yeah. So anything that needs to live outside of that needs to live outside of that. Yeah. It can't live in these documents because it all dies when the deal closes. It's done. Yeah. And so I'm curious. I'm going to check on that one and see if it's still in there because I'm not sure if it is.
Yeah. And but that way, if you get your own, you at least get your own warranty. You know, you
or find a company that does. Because most of the ones that I have worked with will warranty it for a year, for 12 months afterwards.
And then you could get renew those warranties because that's how they make money too, right? Through renewals. And now let's be honest though, the warranty is for treatments, finding live. Like they're not going to come in and repair. right?
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother industry that's supposed to be looking for that. Not saying they can't find, they won't say, hey, you got termite damage and all that stuff.
But if they find it and they treat it, they should warranty it for a year. From my experience, that's what I usually see.
And even when they treat it or not, a lot of them will warranty it. You know, say, hey, well, we didn't find anything. You still have a warranty. 6 months later, hey, we found a spot. All right, we'll treat it.
I'd be surprised if they do that. You think they do?
I know one company that does.
Oh, okay. He's just a good egg, though.
Yeah.
Hey, good plug for
because
him.
we've had that conversation several times.
Right.
Whether or not, and there's more to that story offline. So
got it.
But they do it though.
Yeah.
On how I know, but yeah. So, but going back to all of that is hopefully 2025 isn't just a better market, but hopefully it's just better all the way around with education, training. And
that's what I'm really hoping for. Yeah. And I would caution people to be very careful and very smart with, I mean, I've always felt this way, but even more so now, like you had a giant influx of baby agents coming in during the height of the market. And the market was so strong that a lot of them were doing really well right out the gate. And it was just a trial and error sort of thing. Like they got thrown into the deep end and they tried to figure it out. But the reality is they lack a lot of training because they were too busy, or same thing with high producing agents. Like my hope is be very, very careful. Who's the brokerage that they work for? What is the training that they're offering? Are they attending those trainings? What is their qualification to actually represent you? Because it's not a good idea to just hire your cousin who got a license 6 months ago. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I love a rookie. I love them with my whole heart.
Sure.
Like,
because everybody's got to start somewhere.
Right. There's nothing against that as long as they can show you, this is what I do. This is my training. This is who stands behind me. These are the mentors. This is what I do when there's situations that I don't know what to do. Yes.
To help you. Yeah.
Just, I just never, ever feel bad for people anymore. When they're like, my agent sucked. And I'm like, did you fire him? They're like, no. I'm like, you hired him and you didn't fire him.
Yeah.
So
Because I've been there. I've showed up and the agent's brand new and has absolutely no idea how any of this works. And not just a home inspection, just, well, what do I do now? Well, you negotiate. Well, can we negotiate?
I love that they're asking you.
They do. No. They ask me. Like, I don't know. Like, who's your brokerage?
But that is my point, right? Your brokerage should, like, we have an entire rookie program. It's 18 months long. 18 months. The only way you can graduate out of it is by graduating out of it through your production and by proving that you know what you're doing. But if nobody's holding your hand, like, I don't worry about our rookies for a second because I know there's an entire team of people holding their hands behind the scenes. And we're so happy to do it because we were all brand new and scared the whole time. Yeah. But no, you shouldn't be asking your home inspector, like, how do I do my job?
Yeah. I've had list agents call me and say, hey, the buyer's agent will call you for a home inspection because they're brand new and they have nobody. They don't know who to call or how to schedule or anything. Like, why? She's like, and they're like, I have no idea why they're calling me. Because we're not in the same office.
Yeah, they're like, do you recommend anybody? And I'm like,
and it's one thing if you're like, we're in Richmond, you're in Virginia Beach, right? I mean, that's one thing. But we're talking about like agents that like,
but I'll still say, Sidney, if you're in a market that you're not familiar with, get the hell out. What are you doing? Refer that business out. I would never have the audacity to go to like Nova and be like, yeah, I got it. No, I don't. I don't got it. I don't know that market.
For you, just so you know, that's not happening.
Yeah, exactly.
I have limits.
That's fair.
So.
I don't blame you.
So where do you think we're going to be at the end of the year?
Next year?
Yep. It'll be this year when.
Yeah, that's true. It will. I actually think 2025 is going to be a good year. I think in all aspects, I think that it's going to be a far more gentle year. I think that if I had to guess, I think rates are probably going to stay pretty stable. I don't think we're going to see anything crazy low. I think best case scenario, maybe we see some high fives, maybe.
And that's just a gradual way to get there too. Yeah. You're not going to see that.
And I don't think we're going to like
crazy
stay there, right? Yeah. Like I think we're going to be fluctuating between 6 and 7, somewhere in there for the majority of the year. If I had to guess, right? If we're looking at my crystal ball.
Broken crystal ball.
Yeah. I think we're still going to see less transactions this year, but I am still hopeful that they will be quality transactions. I'm hopeful that people are going to be way more intentional in all aspects, whether it's the ones who work behind the scenes or the ones who are hiring us. Like as an industry, I'm hoping that we're far more conscious and aware of what we're doing and being more careful and thoughtful. I don't like a reckless market. I don't like when people are like feeding frenzy and waiving everything. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of that again.
So you think there's going to be less transaction?
I do, actually. I do. I think we're going to see inventory rise quite a bit too. Yeah. I don't think it'll be terrible, scary rise in inventory, but I think we'll see inventory come up. I think we'll see less sales. I think we'll see a lot more agents leaving the market. I think we're going to see a lot of brokerages go under or switch to a cloud-based structure.
Courtney's saying, put the mic closer to your face.
Fine.
She's over there she's getting hostile.
I never pay attention to her. I probably should.
Wow.
I always just forget.
Ouch.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. She's probably over there like, hello.
She was.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I went.
Yeah.
Normally it is really close, so I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that was like the first time that you started cutting out. So you're all good.
Okay.
I think we're going to see an increase in sales.
Oh,
But
okay.
I don't think it's going to be
Drastic.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I think we're talking, it's going to be smaller numbers, not 27% year over year.
All right. I'm going to keep track of this competition
throughout
throughout the year and see
I
who's
think we're going
right.
to see an increase in sales. I do think there's going to be less agents at the end of it because at the end of the day, if you're good at what you do, you'll be fine, right?
Yeah.
Good or bad. So increase in sales can also mean the good agents, the high producing agents, just get more.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean the people who are struggling to hang on is going to all of a sudden click and they're going to be okay. Because again, nothing's going to happen or nothing's happening unless some crazy policies by the incoming administration is going to change anything. Which we all know that takes a while for anything to actually to materialize from that. So unless, again, you have a catalyst that's going to push that into existence, you're just not going to see wild swings in the market. Because before COVID, it was the 2008 crash, right? And before that, it was whatever, before my time. So to think it's going to have a huge, unless Richmond is just that desirable and
you know what, though?
People moving is going to make it that way.
You just reminded me of one more thing for my predictions for 2025. So a lot of people always ask me like, oh, do you think another crash is coming? And whenever they ask that, I'm like, okay, that tells me right now that you don't understand what the crash was and how it happened and what's been put in place. However, I don't think a crash like that is going to happen again because of the safeguards that have been put in place. But another thing that I see coming for 2025 is a huge issue with homeowners insurance. I think the premiums are
insurance is becoming a problem.
It's a big problem.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we're staring down the
rapidly, very rapidly. And it's been like this in Florida for a long time. And I think we've talked about it. I know I've talked about it with 4 points. And if your roof's older than 10 years, they don't insure it at real estate transactions anyways. We've gotten a few 4 points over the last couple of years here from out of state, like Erie and a couple other random companies. And then we've gotten several phone calls just for roof inspections because they've gotten letters from the insurance companies saying, hey, Google Earth says your roof is old and either replace it or get a certified letter.
Or they'll send drones out.
Yeah, they'll do that. So and then we get that, well, that's a lot just for a roof inspection. Like that's literally all we do is inspections. I call a roofing company. We don't have any other product to offer. So I'm sorry. But, the insurance industry is changing rapidly because they're just, whether you believe climate change is real or not, right? The fact of the matter is they're getting hammered. And if you talk to anybody who owns an insurance company, not the state farms, I'm talking about like the ones that we use that's local and whatnot, they'll tell you that their profits are razor thin, in a good year. So there's just not a lot of money to be made there.
No.
So they're tired. The companies are tired of paying out. Like roofing, for example, after a hailstorm, this came from a roofing company. They used to canvass neighborhoods because insurance companies would pay, $15,000 for a whole new roof. Doesn't matter if that roof was 20 years old,
Right.
but they've changed that. Now they're prorating, which should have always been that way, right? Like, hey, I'll give you $12,000 for a new HVAC, even though it's worth about $17 right now.
Yeah.
So they're just like an insurance company does for cars, right? You total your car, they prorate it for what it's worth.
Right.
That's going to be a big deal, and that's going to create not necessarily any issues for us other than repeat business as deals fall apart, but it's going to be more headaches for you as you're negotiating things you didn't have to negotiate before.
And
like,
I
hey,
think
we need a new roof, but it's not leaking, but we can't get insurance without it, kind of thing.
Or you're going to see, I think, people being forced to sell their homes because their insurance is too much now. It's affecting their payments too much. Yeah. And that's a real bummer. And I do think we're also going to see transactions fall apart. But one of the things that I've seen on my end, and this is probably a topic for another day, but we'll close a deal, they'll get their estimate and we'll put the money in escrow and everything. And then 6 months later, they'll get a letter about their roof from the insurance company. Yep. And it's like, congratulations, you have to put a new roof on. It's like, well, nothing's wrong with my roof. And they're like, well, it's old, so we're either going to drop your coverage or you can put a new roof on.
And it wouldn't surprise me. It's going to take a while. This isn't going to be a 2025 prediction. It could happen, but I could see this in the next couple years, 3 to 5 years, where insurance companies start requiring home inspection reports, whether we go 4 points like Florida or complete reports. Yeah. 4 points are sufficient because it's plumbing, electrical, HVAC, and roof. So they're going to see all the things they don't want to see: knob and tube wiring, polybutylene piping.
Colorado does something similar to this too.
So it's just a matter of time before they start requiring.
Which I kind of don't hate that, in the sense of, like, if it means that the quality of homes are better and that people are taking care of problems instead of just passing the buck to somebody else, like, because that really does suck. And I see a lot of that, unfortunately.
Well, there was also talks, and this is probably about 2 years ago, I started hearing talks about insurance companies starting to require documentation of every upgrade that you do to your house. Every repair, every upgrade, like, you have to start doing it. I don't know what's happening.
Maybe, because that would be cool too if they start requiring permits.
So I don't know what's happening to that. Kind of, I haven't followed up if that's still a thing that's coming, or not. But I remember hearing people talking about it. Like, hey, you go to sell your house, you're going to have this binder of information. Like, the roof was replaced on this day. We had 3 repairs on these days. We added the kitchen on this day. I love those
clients who have the binder, though. I'm like, oh, I love you so much.
Redid our bathroom, this time and whatever. So they want to know all that stuff. So, but yeah, insurance is definitely going to be a bigger factor in our area in 2025. That's going to affect, like I said, it'll be repeat business for us because deals are going to fall apart. Not because of us. It's just because you can't get through the insurance. And the seller's going to be like, well, I'm not going to replace the roof for $15,000 because it's not leaking. We'll find somebody who can get insurance coverage that.
But good luck, because it's becoming a thing, and it's something. It's probably the biggest thing that I have my eye on for 2025. It's
that's definitely going to be the biggest thing.
A finger on it.
The industry outside of the settlement in the next few years, for sure.
100%.
As that continues to evolve, because the insurance companies they're not going to keep eating these costs. Nope. So all right. So you think it's going to be transactions going to be down? I think they're going to be up a little bit. I'm hoping they're going to be up because I hired inspectors.
I think the one thing I will say that we've already seen so far, but I think we're going to see more and more of it, especially through 2025, is I think that sales will be up for townhomes and condos, because that's kind of the only affordable housing that's left.
And that gets away from the insurance a little bit too. You obviously have to have insurance, but when it falls on an HOA or a condo association, whatever. So,
but I think single family home sales will be down.
That's interesting. I like town. They're easy enough.
Well,
most of them are slabs. So, but I think we both agree that the industry is going to be smaller at the end of 2025, and that's all the way around. I can see less inspectors. I mean, we've seen less inspectors because the numbers are about 100 inspectors down year over year, according to the DPOR. Like last year, 2023, at the meeting, there were like 1,000 and some change, 1,057. And this year we were just over 900. So there's already less. And there's a lot of them ready to retire. And they're just going to be like, I'm tired of the grind. And then there's just going to be the new ones who can't get a foothold. And they're going to
Come work for you.
That's right. And then there's just those that's even they've been doing it 5, 6, 7 years. And I'm like, you know what? I'm slow. I'm going to get a job working for the county, city, do something else, whatever. So for sure. But also, and I think we both agree that rates will probably just stay steady.
That's what I'm hoping for, honestly. Like from my perspective,
no wild swings.
That's what I want. Is just like I don't need super low interest rates. Y'all don't need super low interest rates. The economy doesn't need super low interest rates. Like we need steady. That's what I would love to see.
Yeah, and I think that can hold true because the last 6 months, 7 months, whatever. I think they've held pretty steady. Lack of swings.
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, plus or minus. Like
they've been a little
holding
more
steady. It's not necessarily holding at 6.5. It's just gradual. Increases or decreases.
But there's been a few instances where within a matter of days or even just a couple weeks, like we've seen a pretty steep. I would like to see it be more gentle in 2025 than it has been over the last 6 months.
Yeah, sure, for sure. So, all right, well, got anything else?
I don't. I'm excited for another year of this chaos.
Are you?
I am. I mean, at this point, you get to a certain point where you're like, just bring it on, whatever.
No, I'm excited for it. I'm excited for the growth, for what we can do as a company.
Yeah.
Like I said, if everything, and I heard from several really good agents that talked about how hard this year was. So I'm not talking about just the agents who, sit at home waiting for their phone to ring or inspectors waiting for their phone to ring. Like I've heard from really good agents like, man, this is one of the hardest years I've done.
Well, and I think too, it wasn't even just the sales, right? Like, I don't think that's what people understand. It's the fact that there was massive litigation against our industry. Yes. A lot of it was completely out of our control. It had nothing to do with the people down on the ground actually doing the job, right? And then the other thing that really sucks is like, I've watched so many of my coworkers who I love and who I have respect for and who have done a really good job in this industry leave because they had to, because they have families to feed. And watching that many people lose their jobs essentially that you love and care about and their families and you've worked with them for years and they're hardworking, to have to see that over and over again and then just kind of wonder in the back of your head, like, crap, am I next? Like, that's tough.
It is tough. And that's, every day, week, month, and year, I keep looking, thinking it's going to be us too. Yeah. But like I said, we've been very fortunate, whatever the reasons are. Mm-hmm. So I don't expect a 20-some% increase again, but I do think we can have a lot of opportunity to grow and capture more market share because that's essentially what we're doing. Yeah. And I think for a lot of agents, when it gets really slow, it's capturing more market share. Not necessarily it's a good market. You're just better at acquisitions. Yeah. And whatnot. So, all right, we'll see what happens.
All right, let's go 2025.